Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We had heard of dragons in the fairy tales who were always emitting fire and smoke. But in the political world of today, there's a dragon called dragon, China, which emits hot and cold at the same time. The recent meeting of the foreign ministers of India and China made it clear that the situation along the LAC line of actual control is and beyond is unlikely to diffuse quickly. They were all nice words. And then comes the stunning news that more than 1,000 Indian top leaders, legislators, business leaders, movie personalities, even Chief Justice of India, heads of the political parties, they are being watched, scrutinized, and who knows, prompted by the Chinese secret services every minute. Some families are also on the radar. Gandhi family is there, Lalu Yadav's family is there, Mulayam Singh Bahadur. These are the whole family groups. Then all the business stalwarts, the prime ministers, past and present, the leaders of the various parties, the business houses. The list is endless. I call it the hybrid war. And this hybrid war, coupled with the recent paratroopers jumping near the border, shows that India cannot take it lightly. The meeting of the foreign ministers ended with a joint statement and a 5 point action formula for peace. I think China loves 5 points. There was a Panchila agreement with Nehru, which was flouted with impunity by China. And now comes this 5 point agreement for peace. And China's intention is clear. It's blaming India for the standoff, while India has stressed the necessity of restoring pre-April 2020 status, which is still not there. Some parts India has recovered. It's on the top of finger four. But what about the others? If you have noticed it, the joint statement leaves actual disengagement not to political imperatives, but to the troops on the borders and their continued dialogue, which is a good thing. The only hope is that the further escalation of the standoff into active hostilities would be prevented. But is that enough? Especially when China is not indulging in just open warfare on the border, kidnapping and then returning the Indian youth, sending illegal people, monitoring Indian leaders and the opinion makers, and who knows, bind them. Nobody is above suspicion. Nobody is. The recent disclosure that a Congress party, a political party, had entered into an agreement in China is beyond comprehension. So the restoration of peace and tranquility is unlikely. It's going to be easy. Ahead of the meeting and after even, Beijing blamed India for the situation at the border. India has raised concern about the Chinese to build up. The joint statement emphasizes the need of a dialogue, confidence building measures, and other mechanisms. But then, need who says it's not there? The point is, are the parties working for it? The confrontation of China with China and the instances have increased in the past few years is not likely to reduce. Let's be very clear. All these discussions of Rajnath and Jaishankar would remain empty discussions that I fail to understand why India has not understood the nature of this dragon in the last 70 years. Wasn't backstabbing in 1962 a sufficient lesson? As a matter of fact, Pandit Nehru should have broken the diplomatic relations, and that would have been very helpful. But then he did not. And the present government is also not doing it well, maybe for a good reason. But India's proactive efforts to forge alliances and the partnership is likely to improve some infrastructure, and that's needed. The question I raised in the beginning, what is needed to promote? The first is this what Modi government is doing, forging alliances, the agreement with Japan, with Australia, the establishment of Quad, the agreement with Israel, the building up of relations with USA, and something very interesting which I must appreciate and I have been appreciating in my writing, that for the first time in the history, the infrastructure in Ladakh is being developed, and that is not welcome to China. If you have been reading the Globe Times, the Chinese Communist English paper, they are literally warning New Delhi against close partnership with US and other powers. You see, the problem is that India is at times behaving like the French king who learned nothing and forgot nothing. If we take the foreign minister's statement in proper perspective, it would be necessary to recount the latest incident, not the latest, but 1986 incident historical. You can't ignore history. The Samdrong Chu incident. Most of the people would not even know it. And if they knew, they must have forgotten it. The Samdrong Chu incident started in June 1986. And this incident lasted for nearly 1 year. It was in June 1986 when the incident started, and Rajiv Gandhi had to visit China. Then there were 5 years of torturous negotiations, a characteristic Chinese style, draw out, exhaust the negotiator, make stupid demands, make stupid statements, make contradictory statements, confuse, befuddle, you know, and ultimately they arrived at a agreement which is absolutely ineffective, useless. And PLA, People's Liberation Army, has smashed that agreement into bits and pieces. In now, China is pushing its agenda to de-link border resolution from the template of bilateral relations. Why? You cannot have good relations if your borders are being threatened. Let's be very clear. It's like saying, okay, I'm coming and sitting in your room, in your house, and we'll talk about it, but don't bother if we are misusing your house, if we are trying to aggressively take over your house. And some or the other, China seems to have convinced India to remain focused on economic development, and that would be disastrous. India would remain focused on economic development, leading to debilitating supply chain dependencies. So, the border talks would be put on the back burner and in slow work, and that must not happen. Let Modi government wake up and not be deluded into this fine talk of China, of giving attention only to economy. These things are minor, they are thoughts, they'll be removed. Let's look after the good poor people, let elevate their standards. Bullshit. And belatedly, I would say that some political leaders have realized that it's a clever ploy. Rajiv Gandhi was taken over by this 5 years torture agreement, which was smashed later on, 1962 agreement, Tibet, all that. Always divert. The typical, takia, deception, misleading, sweet talk, sugar coated talk, and then the backstabbing. Typically, what Afzal Khan Shivaji did, embrace and stab in the back. So, we have got to realize not to be taken in by the clever pride to gain time, because gaining time is harmful for India. And when they gain time, they utilize it for modernization and reforms of PLA. Unfortunately, we were lulled earlier and we neglected our armed forces. And the status of our forces and pandemic convinced PLA to apply. Now, I'm quoting from the strategy of PLA: loot a burning house. Their strategy is, if you want to loot, set it on fire and then loot it, because people will be busy putting out the fire. This is in their war fighting manual. I happen to look at it. The title of the manual is the 36 stratagems. 36 stratagems. So there are 36 strategies which guide PLA in its fight. Unfortunately, I would say that the Indian military leadership has not responded to those 36 strategies. They have responded to about 8 of them. That's it. And in my talks with some defense people and minor communication, when I talked to them, they said, well, political was lacking till now. Luckily, now the political will is there, but then the time schedule has shifted. This strategy is not 1 second affair. It's a long drawn out affair. The 36 stratagems, when they came up in early 20,000, 2002, I think it was. And then, in 2011, I had a discussion with Manmohan Singh. And I told Manmohan Singh that they said, no, we shouldn't care. These 36 stratagems are just for their own local consumption. I said, look here, they're strengthening PLA. But then, no, the concept of the looting house would not appeal to that political leadership. So, what we have done is we have bound ourselves, India, to the protocols of banner drills and banning firearms. Well, you are at the border, but you shall not use fire. Why? So, that's why we lost 20 people, because we were not using firearm, not even the personal firearm. And what did it do? Promote the use of the barbaric storage weapons. The critical requirement of any discussion is to ensure, and this is what India should do, the coupling of progress on the border resolution with overall bilateral relations. Let's tell them clearly, no. Economy, no economy, that's our internal outlook. We don't need your advice. We don't need your suggestion. Our all discussions with you would be all embracing, not only scheduled to economy or political relations. We have to be blunt. It has to be stated unequivocally, without any ambiguity, that the border definition cannot go hand in hand with trade. That's not possible, and it would not be done. The model should be like we are doing with Pakistan. We are telling Pakistan very clearly that trade and talks and terror cannot go together. Their talks and terror are their two teams. Here it should be talks and border, TB. And it would be appropriate for Modi government to incorporate defense experts in diplomacy to signal our concern and focus. Why cannot our defense team be a part of the political discussions? Have you seen the contrast in the two defense delegations recently when Rajnath met the Chinese defense minister? The Indian side was bureaucrat dominated, sensible, logical, but unaware of the needs of the war, fighting, war strategy. And the Chinese side was uniform heavy. 95% Chinese delegation was from PLA and 100% Indian was bureaucrat. It's a stark difference. It has to be changed. You cannot have that. You have to have the armed means strategies, the military strategies, a part of the negotiation. The desire end should be to convert LAC to firm border. I call LAC at present line of ambitious claim, a line of imagined claim, and line of agreed clarity. We have got to see that. So this C should be converted, control should be converted into clarity. Line of agreed clarity. That should be our definition of LAC. You see, it's rather disappointing that diplomats have reinforced status quo and they have not provided any clarity or commitment to this aim, aim of making it a firm border. Unfortunately, officials and resources are giving an optimistic spin. But then the silver lining is there. We are still talking and promulgating joint declaration. And then the beauty is that India doesn't understand. China, while signing the joint declaration, immediately issues an addendum. And this time the addendum said the border resolution can remain delinked from the bilateral issues. So this is like a reference to strategic guidance to commanders. And it was spelled out only in the Indian declaration after war. So why not in the joint one? So what happened? This resulted in one side India complied, PLA did not. So now what is happening is that the corps commander are expected to kickstart the disengaged process. Although the original protocols have been destroyed by China and that trust is not there, simply not there. What is PLA going to do? I can tell you today. PLA will make all attempts to shift the focus of de-escalation to Spangerpur gap. This Spangerpur gap would be a disaster. India has to remain centered on consequences in proper order. And that should be the aim of India. That is, number one, hot springs. Number two, Gogra. Finger 5, 6, 7, 8. North of Pagang So, Dipsang, and Spangerpur Gap. If we are able to do that, and then we need buffer zone. Formulation of buffer zone needs review. It should not limit our freedom of patrolling. And before analyzing possible scenarios, India should reiterate that the hype of PLA, technological prowess, in cyber, electronic, and surveillance has to be debunked. That has not been done. 5 months of standoff are there, and yet we have not shown that PLA is a paper tiger. Until we do that, and until we keep on widening our partnerships with US, Japan, Australia, South Asian countries, European Union, West Asia, and key Arab republics, we will not be able to deal with this dragon effectively. And it's important, imperative to do so right now without further delay. I hope and trust Modi government listens and acts accordingly. Thank you.